Week 3 of the November window sees 2 of the form teams going head to head. My name is Mark. Let's talk rugby. Just before we move on to the rugby, I wanted to send some love to Mark and Gaza from the 2 Cents Rugby channel. Most of you will be familiar with Mark's channel and what's going on, with his dad health-wise. Got some terrible news, and Mark has been one of the major inspirations for me creating this channel, along with Garrett Mason as well. I try to kind of follow their lead in terms of improving content and the way I handle myself as well on the channel. And it's very sad news, and I just wanted to send some love during this what must be a very difficult period for them. So now let's get to the less important subject of the rugby that is on this weekend. We're going to be I always say we're going to be short, but we're going to be short on this one because I got my dinner. I've made my dinner. I have it waiting. So I want to get that eaten before it's stone cold. So what we're going to do on this one, we're not going to go into as much depth as we normally do. Just going to go through what games are on, how I think they're going to go, and that's it. Then throw it over to you guys for how you feel things are going to turn out. So I'm going to start with the first game of the weekend, and it's on Saturday 15th of November. This is Italy versus South Africa. It's in the Allianz Stadium in Turin. It is a 12:40 kickoff. That's Ireland or UK time, 1:40 local time. So got Italy, who are going to be buoyed by that win against Australia last week. Very impressive there. And then you got South Africa, who last week against France with 14 men for the second half of that game just showed why they're absolutely undisputed number 1 in the world. And I think in terms of this game, then Italy, I think, will be looking for a performance rather than a result, and South Africa probably going to see some rotation and just see how much depth those guys have. Like, it's absolutely scary, but they've built it through. They've obviously got a group of guys in Japan, but they've mostly built it through the URC in terms of the depth that is below a lot of those guys. And we're just seeing, Razi bring in all these guys that have been turned up at URC level. And there's very few of them that have been doing that at URC level that aren't delivering at test level. A lot of the time you'll see guys who are running around the URC or Premiership or Top 14 or wherever, Super Rugby, and then you put them in a test environment and they can't live up to it. But, the way that the Boks have identified these players and brought them through has been absolutely staggering. And they do have really scary depth. And because of that, even though I expect South Africa to probably change almost the entire team from that game against France, I still expect that they're probably going to win fairly comfortably in the end. And as I said, for Italy, probably just looking for a performance. Okay, next then we come to what undoubtedly is the fixture of the weekend. That's England versus New Zealand. This also at the Allianz Stadium, but this time Twickenham, and the kickoff is 3:10 p.m. So you got 2 of the form teams of the November internationals. You got England, who looked very impressive against Australia, and then they made some changes against Fiji and were able to come through. Even though Fiji had some moments in that game, you still felt that England had more than enough to beat them. And then New Zealand, poor against Ireland, but certainly the better of the 2 teams, and just kind of getting into their stride. And then against Scotland, get out to a brilliant lead, let Scotland back into the game a bit, but like they did against Ireland, delivered in the last 20 minutes, the bench having a massive impact. And both of these teams, we've seen their benches be pretty impactful in terms of, the momentum of the game into that last quarter of the game and basically taking the teams home. So it makes this one really difficult to predict. Obviously, I'm a Northern Hemisphere guy, and I'm normally going to be backing England, but in this one, I think I'm going to back for New Zealand, and I just feel like New Zealand, Razors come into a lot of criticism, but if he can deliver a Grand Slam tour, I think people will start rethinking their assessment of him and of his team. And, I'm probably going to be cheering for England during the game, but I think New Zealand are probably going to nick it in the end. But it should be the most exciting game of the weekend. Okay, on to the next one then. We've gone from 2 form teams to 2 out of form teams. Wales versus Japan at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Kickoff is at 5:40 p.m. So we got Wales, who didn't look good last week against Argentina. Obviously, there's some optimism there, given that was the start of Steve Tandy's reign as Wales head coach. And you would think, that performance and that result, had it been under Warren Gatland, would have been seen in a very different light, I think. But people, obviously, the start of someone's tenure, they're going to focus more on the positives. And there were some positives for Wales, some really good backs play, but still they conceded over 50 points in that game. So, defense absolutely has to be sorted out there. But still being able to carry some kind of threat going forward as well. And then Japan, beaten comprehensively by Ireland, but they look better certainly in the Ireland game against than that game against South Africa first up. Although I still think there's a decent gap between South Africa and Ireland at the moment. But I think as well the scoreline in the end kind of flattered Ireland. I thought Japan were a bit closer. Maybe like a 20-point, 15-point kind of defeat would have been fairer on them, I think, in terms of just a performance. But still, 2 teams who haven't won this window so far. Wales, obviously, 0 from 1, Japan 0 from 2. And looking at this, it's always weird for me when people say, like, Japan are a Southern Hemisphere team. I understand why, because they're connected to that, especially you've seen it when they had a team in Super Rugby, etc. But, they're very clearly a Northern Hemisphere team, geographically at least. So, in terms of North versus South, I don't really have one to pick. Normally, I'd back Wales because they're a URC team, but then Japan, like my wife was from Japan, I lived there for a long time, so it's difficult to actually pick in this one who I'm actually going to cheer on. I just hope that it feels like it's going to be a game that could finish 40 something to 30 something or high 30s to high 30s, and there being a last minute score for either team to win it. And yeah, it's hard to pick. I won't know until the day. I'm kind of, edging a little bit towards Japan because of my history with them. But then I also want to support a URC team as well. So, and I can't call a draw. So just because Wales beat Japan earlier on in the year, I'm going to say Wales are going to just about nick it, but it's going to be a high scoring, I think, overall entertaining game for neutrals. Okay, next then we have France versus Fiji. This one is in the Stade Atlantique Bordeaux Métropole in Bordeaux. Kickoff is 8:10 p.m., 9:10 local time. And so we got, Fiji, who put it up to England, ended up losing 38-18, but they looked decent for parts of that game, and just their ability on the ball is outstanding. France lost against South Africa. And the disappointing thing for me was when South Africa were down to 14, France simply, for me, lost their ambition. They went for a penalty, and that was the last score they got in the game. And it felt like at that stage, going for a try, whether you got it or not, would have been better in terms of statement of intent, getting the crowd on side, and being able to continue carrying that threat. But they didn't do it. Yes, they were against an exceptional team in South Africa, but France at home, they were talking it up about revenge for the World Cup, etc., and it just didn't deliver. So now I expect in this game they will deliver. They'll probably struggle early on because Fiji are a decent team, and I think some teams they almost feel like they have a right to win the game, but against teams like Fiji, you have to win that right first. And I think that's why they'll struggle early on, and then maybe they'll reset things and realize, hang on, we can't just be trying to run it in from everywhere. We got to keep it tight, actually beat them up front first, and then we can win the game. I think that's how that game is going to go. And because of that, I'm going to predict a France win, but a bit of a clunky performance maybe until the second half. Okay, next then, the last Saturday game is Ireland versus Australia. This is at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. Kickoff is 8:10 p.m. local time. So here you've got Ireland, haven't had a terribly impressive November. They looked very disjointed and stilted against the All Blacks. Made changes for the game against Japan, and things didn't go great for them there either. Like, they come out with a win, and on the scoreline, like 41-10, looks like a comfortable win, but the performance wasn't up to the standard that you'd expect for a team winning by 30 odd points. And the lineout is still an absolute mess. That has to get sorted out for this one. Then we got Australia, didn't perform very well against England, didn't really fire a shot. The only try they got was an intercept from their own line, and didn't really produce any other moments of threat throughout the match. And then the defeat then to Italy last week would have been a bit of a hammer blow to them, because yes, Italy beat them the last time they played, and that was in Italy as well. But still, Australia, they look decent at times in the Rugby Championship this year, but they were inconsistent. But now we're seeing them being consistently poor, which is not the way that they wanted it to come out for them. And because of that, I think Ireland at home, and now, like, Ireland need to produce a performance in this game, and I think they will do it. And because of that, I'm going to back Ireland to win, but Australia to give them a bit of a scare as well, because no matter how poor they've been playing, I think Australia, Ireland's problems is teams that can get to width and have pace out wide, and Australia have that. And because of that, I think they're going to get a few scores and stay in the game. Maybe against the run of play a little bit. But yeah, I think they're set up attacking wise pretty well to exploit Ireland's flaws. And I don't think Ireland are clicking enough to kind of shut that down. But I do think they're going to be good enough to take the win. So I'm going to go for an Ireland win in that one. Then on to the Sunday game. Sunday, 16th of November, Scotland versus Argentina. This is at Scottish Gas Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh. Kickoff is 3:10 p.m. local time. So we've got Scotland, who, started out with basically a training run against USA, 85-0. Pretty easy win for them. Then they go against New Zealand, losing 17-0 at half time. Terrible lapse just before the break as well, to go from 10-0 to 17-0 down. Get themselves back in the game, back to 17-all, but basically, they'd blown themselves out by having to make the effort to get back into it, and then New Zealand just pulled away in the end. And Scotland weren't threatening, and it was a big opportunity for them to potentially get that first win over the All Blacks, but they weren't able to deliver. And, we've seen that so much from the Scotland side, where they can look decent at times, but when it comes down to that kind of, that mental edge, that ability, that doggedness to be able to pull out results a lot of the time against the bigger nations, partly apart from England, because they can do it against England. I don't know why they do it against them, but they can't do it against others. But they're not able to deliver for the most part. And again, they weren't able to do it. So I'm expecting them to bounce back in this game. But then you have Argentina, who have been in brilliant form through the Rugby Championship. They beat New Zealand in one of the games against South Africa. They gave them a bit of a run. Obviously got a bit of a hiding in the other one. But then they absolutely took Wales apart as well, scoring 50 points, more than 50 points, 52 points in the Principality. And, Argentina, when they click, are just so good. They're so on it. And it's kind of weird where they seem to be one of those teams that have the biggest gap between their ceiling and their floor in terms of performance, because they can be absolutely dire, but on their day, they can be anybody in the world, and, it's, can they be consistent though? Because it's been a long time now since we've seen this Argentina be consistent enough to really say, listen, we're at the top table. They're kind of, they're there or thereabouts. I think that's what you can see with their ranking at the minute as well, is, they're almost in that top echelon in terms of, being really, like, when you think about like the real top teams in the world, they're just on the border of that, and that's where they are ranking wise as well. They're just about in that top 6, I think, at the moment, and they'll be looking to kind of cement that position there at the moment. Scotland, obviously, again, looking to bounce back from that defeat against New Zealand. So I think this will be another decent game to watch. Two teams who, when they get the opportunity, can throw the ball around. They've got great movement in their backs, and they've got a lot of playmakers across their back lines as well. And given that, I think it's going to be another one where it's maybe not going to be as high scoring as Wales versus Japan, but it feels like it's going to be 30 odd points to maybe high 20s or something like that. And because Scotland are at home and because they are a URC team, I'm going to back them to just about nick it. But again, Argentina, I think if they hit top gear, they could, certainly win the game. And maybe they will be too much for Scotland to handle as well. But I think just that burning, desire just to prove themselves from Scotland after kind of the, almost capitulation in Murrayfield, that they weren't able to take on, get back to 70-0 and weren't able to go on from there. That's going to be eating at them. And I think because of that, that's going to be enough to take them to the win here. It's going to predict a Scotland win there. Okay, so that's the end of this one. Let me know what you think down in the comments.